Today is July 21st and it is 9 o'clock a.m. and we're here right outside the Rod Library on UNI's campus. My name is Brenann Hamilton with the UNI Museum and I'll be interviewing Avery Johnson today. Thank you so much for interviewing with us today. Please state your name, the years that you attended your consolidated school, and where that school was.
So my name is Avery Johnson. The years that I attended my consolidated school would have been from 4th grade until I graduated in 2014. So in 4th grade it didn't really affect me because we had two separate elementaries. So it wasn't until 5th grade that I really started getting to know other students from, the other schools. That's when they matched us together. So
describe your childhood.
So I grew up about 3 miles outside of Greene, Iowa, and the school I attended was North Butler, and that means this is Greene, Allison, and Bristow, so those three small towns together. But I was normally just outside of Greene. My dad was a farmer. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. She eventually became a volunteer at school when I was in 2nd grade, and then started teaching at a different school when I was a little bit older. But I grew up romping around in the countryside, just loved being outdoors, so I love the fact that we're interviewing outside today, and just had a good time. My brother is 2 years younger than me, and it was just the two of us, and we didn't really have a lot of chance to go hang out with friends because we were out in the country on our own, so it was always just the two of us doing everything together.
Okay, and what's your brother's name?
Addison.
And how far away did you live from school?
I think it's probably about 5-6 miles from school.
What were some of your interests as a child?
As a child, I loved bugs and insects. That sounds really interesting and different, but in 4th grade I said that I wanted to be an entomologist and study bugs for the rest of my life. I loved ant farms, and that's maybe it came from watching Pixar's Bug's Life, but it's been a passion of mine that stuck with me all of my life. I could just sit and watch ants for hours. I just love being outside and exploring. My dad would take us down in the woods and into the creek and explore a lot. And then as I got a little bit older, I just loved video games a lot as well.
What role did school play in your upbringing?
Pretty big role. I was very academically minded. During the summers, my mom would kind of homeschool us a little bit. So we would have this curriculum and these packets and kind of things that we'd have to do during the summer, just so we avoided the summer slump. But she still let us play and stuff in the afternoons, and later on in the summer we had more free time. But those are really, really helpful. I read a lot too. And school was just kind of one of those things where I was able to learn a lot, but then also just take full advantage of everything I was learning and pursue some other interests that I had, like learning about bugs and learning about other things just on my own free reading time. So reading and English and writing were probably my favorite subjects. So I did enjoy science as well. Math I was pretty good at, but it wasn't my favorite subject.
What is your earliest memory of going to school?
Probably kindergarten. We had these really fancy special cement seats in a hallway, and underneath there were heaters. And so during the winter when we went outside to play during recess, we'd come back in and the hallway would be warm because the radiators were underneath those cement seats that would just kind of retain the heat, and then you would sit on them and they'd just be nice and toasty, and they'd dry out all of your clothes from all the wet snow and everything that we'd just been playing in. So I remember being in kindergarten and just trying to make friends in kindergarten. We would do a lot of different playing with different blocks and organizing them. I remember telling a friend that I could speak a different language. I really couldn't, but I remember I just babble nonsense and say it was a different language and just do a lot of goofy stuff in kindergarten.
So what did a typical morning before going to school look like for you?
So when I was in elementary school, I don't really remember too much aside from just waking up and then getting breakfast in us, getting packed up for the day and heading off to school. When I got older, middle school and high school, we had chores in the morning that we would do. So I would do the dishes, and we'd have to go down and take care of, we had goats on the farm, and so we'd go down and take care of the goats, usually around 6 a.m. And then we would come back up to the house and shower and get ready for the school day and head in. Occasionally, during the cross-country season, because that's the only sports that I ever did, we would have some morning practices, which would require us to be at school pretty early. But normally be at school, I'd say probably maybe around 7:30 in high school, maybe a little bit later than that. And when I got to school early before classes started, I just went to the library and read. In middle school, we had to travel a little bit farther because Allison was a little bit farther away, and that's where middle school was located. And so we'd get to school a little bit earlier than everyone else because my mom would drop us off on the way as she went to Clarksville where she taught. So we'd be to school way ahead of everyone else, and we just kind of roamed the hallway.
So what were some of your at-home expectations?
My mom just had this expectation that we would help around the house with chores, doing dishes and doing a lot of house cleaning. Every Saturday it was we call it house cleaning day or whatever, cleaning day. And so we spend the Saturday morning cleaning the house, vacuuming, cleaning the bathrooms, things like that. Yeah, it was a lot of work on the farm, just maintaining things, taking care of things, but at the same time, when we got our work done, it was playtime. So we were able to go outside, play games together, go exploring, like I said, down in those woods in the creek, and that was kind of nice. My grandma lived only 3 miles away from us, so we would sometimes run or bike over to her house. It was all gravel, but we would go over and we would help her with things or just play games with her because she loved card games, her and my grandpa both. So we get to spend time with them too.
What did you typically wear to school? Did you have a uniform at all?
No uniform. We could wear whatever we wanted. I just wore pretty much whatever my mom gave me when I was in elementary. In middle school, I started becoming conscious of like what other people thought of me, and so I started wearing just like these plain shirts, nothing on them, just a plain color. And I was a chunkier kid. You wouldn't guess it by looking at me now, but I was a really chunky kid and kind of insecure in my body. And so I just wore these plain shirts. And eventually I realized I could have shirts with like things on them and icons and words on them. And so I got those. But we just got like clothes from Walmart and we wore those to school. I did get made fun of a couple of times for some of the shirts and things that I wore, but it's just what middle school kids do. I was never very fashionable. I didn't have like, you know, the latest trendy fashionable clothes or anything like that. But yeah, we got by. It was fine.
So how did you typically get to school?
When I was younger, my parents would drive us and drop us off, and then they would pick us up as well. We never had to ride the bus until later on in middle school. And still then my parents would drop us off in the morning and then we'd just ride the bus home after school. When I got my learner's permit and got my license at 14 and 16, then I drove to school. My parents got a vehicle for my brother and I. And so I would drop my brother off and then I would go drive to the high school and park and just hang out at school.
So how far away was the middle school from the high school?
So it'd be the distance between Greene and Allison. So we would go to Greene and the bus stop would be there and we'd hop on there and we had to ride the bus, kind of like 2 shuttle buses that would shuttle all the Greene kids over to Allison. And there would be a swap where the bus drivers would change. We'd park in this little gravel lot on the way to Allison, and there'd be one bus coming from Allison with all the Allison kids that needed to go to the high school in Greene. So they'd shuttle the Greene kids to the middle school, and then the Allison kids to the high school, and then the bus drivers would swap and get on different buses. I want to say 11 miles, but I'm not exactly sure. I just remember the road was really, really bumpy.
Was there any really unique or distinctive way that you got to school?
Yeah, I guess the only ways I can really think of are times when the weather had been a factor. I just remember a couple of car rides. Like one time we got, I think, snow in like late April or early May, and so we were driving home. My brother and I, we had a minivan for the first couple of years of high school, or I did, and so I was driving that white minivan home and just driving through like a couple of inches of slush, and it was just flying up around us. It was really fun to drive through. Later on in my high school career, there was icy roads one morning, and my brother and I were driving to school, and we were going not too fast or anything, but we came to the top of this hill, and all of a sudden our truck that we were driving at that point started turning, like on top of this hill, and it turned around, and we were going backwards. And I just remember looking over at my brother and just like staring him in the eyes, and we were speechless. We didn't know what to say, but we knew what we were thinking. We were like, oh crap. And it was slippery, and we slid across into the other lane and then down into the ditch. And I think we should have had a 2-hour delay that morning, but we didn't, which is I think why we went into the ditch. Thankfully no cars were coming. There was a car that came by later and checked on us, but we had already called my dad. We were maybe a mile from our house, and so dad came and drove the truck out. It didn't roll or anything. We were safe. That was a memorable experience. Otherwise, I just remember being on the bus going to middle school. We'd always want to sit in the very back because that's where all the cool kids sat, but I didn't really know how to have conversations at that point, so I would just sit there quietly, and kids were always like, why do you want to sit in the back with all the talkers when, you know, you don't say anything and just take up space? So eventually I kind of got over trying to sit in the back and fighting for those back spots, and just fine with wherever I got, and I spent that time, you know, to read or do whatever on the drive over.
Describe the way that the school looked like and like the layout of an average classroom.
The elementary felt a little bit older, and it was an older school in Greene. That's shut down now. They're not using it. So all elementary and middle school kids go to Allison now. Yeah, so the Greene school is an older building, but the classrooms were fine. They had, I think, little desks, and really it was more like, I guess, little tables and little chairs that we would sit in. In Allison, there was also, I think, tables and chairs. I guess there were some desks there as well. The layout's always varied for the classroom. I remember like our math class would have like 4 desks clumped together, and so we'd sit in those kind of pods. Our English classes, they were kind of in rows with some spaces in between so the teacher could walk around. And science classes, we were sitting in small little chairs and desks, and then we had labs, like lab tables in the back that we would use every now and then. The middle school was a little bit more up to date. It was, I think, carpeted, and it seemed a little bit more recent, more new than what the elementary was. And then the high school was even more recent than the Allison Middle School too. It was remodeled and remade, I think, before we even consolidated, which is one reason why we were able to keep the high school in Greene. It would have been just desks and chairs kind of in the typical row and typical fashion.
Did your school have any defining features like a basement or gym, cafeteria?
Yeah, we had cafeterias in both. Cafeteria in the middle school was the multi-purpose room, I guess, so it was a gym and a cafeteria. And then in the middle school, right across from that multi-purpose room, there was a auditorium that was pretty nice. We had plays and stuff in it. In the high school, we had kind of an open cafeteria area, which is where you probably walk in if you go into the main doors. Actually, there was a basement in the high school. That's where the locker rooms were downstairs, and they connected to two different gyms. We had a new gym and an old gym. The old gym was there from before the remodel, so they salvaged that and kept it from the old high school, and then tore everything else down and just connected it to the new one that they built. So we had two different gyms, and we used the old gym a lot for PE. And then the locker rooms kind of were down in between the two, kind of in a lower level. You could walk from both to get to the locker room, but pretty much everything else, like, it was just one floor. There was no really levels to it.
So what sort of technology did your school have access?
We had computers in the library, we had some computer lab. Our school actually went through the process of getting Macs, and so we had Mac computers, which were really, really nice to use, especially in the high school. Middle school, I think it was more of Dell PCs that we used, but in the high school it was all Macs. And then also in high school we got access to one-to-one Mac laptops, so we all had our own personal Mac laptop that we would use in our classes. And we were kind of like one of the first classes that got those one-to-one computers, and so my school had to figure out, a lot of things with like just putting safeguards on those computers, but we were always trying to get around like the firewalls and stuff to play games and stuff during class. We played a lot of Minecraft, and they always tried to shut that down, but we could always find a way around it and make like a bootleg version of it to get access to Minecraft and other games or other websites so we could play during the school day. And honestly, I think I mentioned being more academically focused. That was definitely in elementary school and middle school. And high school, I just showed up, and I was one of those kids that didn't have to study a lot, and so I spent a lot of time that I could have been using productively on my classes to play games. And during classes they gave us some flexibility too, and so I would be gaming when the teacher wasn't looking and doing that kind of thing. So that kind of probably eroded some of the learning I had could have had in high school, but I don't know. It was kind of a fun challenge in itself, just to outsmart the teachers and the tech guys.
So was social media ever incorporated into the classroom or the school?
But we didn't have access to Facebook or Twitter. We could find ways around like the firewalls to get to it, but we never used it in the classroom. What we had instead was like the educational version of Facebook, which is called Edmodo. And so we would log on to Edmodo, our Edmodo accounts, and we'd be in our different classes, and we could see assignments and homework posted in there and comment on things and ask questions. So yeah, it's like an educational version of Facebook, but we never thought it was nearly as interesting as what Facebook or Twitter had.
Were you ever allowed to bring your own technology to school, or did your school ban that?
We could bring our phones, but we couldn't really be on our phones. It depended on the teacher. Some teachers were really strict about it and they'd take phones away. Other teachers were very much more lax about it, so we were always fiddling around on our phones, playing games. I played a lot of games on my phone for apps. I didn't have a phone until kind of later in middle school and I think maybe early high school, but we got iPod Touches and we used our iPod Touches to log on to the school's Wi-Fi and play games. I do remember too, we didn't really have great Wi-Fi at my house growing up because we were out in the country, and things have changed drastically now because we got fiber optic cables right out to the farm, so we have really high-speed internet there now, but at the time we didn't. And I could just think of like, wow, my brother and I would have been really much more into gaming if we had had that fiber optic cable when we were growing up versus now. But we were always struggling for getting bandwidth and trying to get connection. But there's a lot of times where we would drive to school, sit in the school parking lot and log into the school's Wi-Fi and download updates to apps and download games just by sitting in the school parking lot. So we would sit there for a couple hours just getting all of our updates and downloads done over the school Wi-Fi.
So when you first got a phone, did you start off with a smartphone or did you get like a flip phone?
I had a flip phone. Yeah, it wasn't too fancy.
You mentioned that you got your phone like a little bit later. What was the average age of people getting phones in your class?
I feel like a lot of people had phones in middle school, so 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th especially. I feel like 7th and 8th grade was kind of like the turning point where I was like, okay, it's time to start getting phones, especially early high school. I think like everyone had a phone by the time we were in high school.
So did your school offer any sort of like technology classes?
Yeah, they had classes related to graphic design. They had some classes related to, later on, especially working with the one-to-one computers, because the tech guy just needed some help, and it was one of them. And so they created a team of students that worked with the Macs and kind of experts in that area. In middle school, before we had the one-to-one laptops, there were some typing classes, so we could learn to properly type, though I don't think I ever did. I just learned how to type on my own. I don't think I do it right, but it just works for me for now. I need to unlearn and relearn. But yeah, we didn't really have too much for technology classes.
Were they mandatory or was it like an optional course?
No, I don't think they were. They were all optional.
So when you arrived at school, how did the day typically begin?
Well, I would usually get there a little bit early, and so a lot of people would hang out in the cafeteria and talk and hang out, but then I usually went to the library and I read, and then the cool people started to hang out in the library too, so it got louder in there, and then I had to go find a new quiet place, and they would do all sorts of shenanigans in the library and didn't care about that. But then the bell would ring around, I think, 8:15, and we'd go to first class, and we would start the day.
Did your school offer, like, breakfast or any sort of activities before the day started?
Yeah, there was breakfast offered. I never used it. I always ate breakfast at home, just because I didn't want to pay for it. I think there might have been once or twice where I got breakfast at school.
So how many students were in your graduating class or in your school altogether?
I had 42 students in my graduating class, 44 if you count the 2 international students that were with us that semester too.
How do you remember your classmates?
We had a wide range of people. We had people that were like traditional farm kids, and they would hang out with the trucks after school, or they'd drive their tractors to school on the last day of school and took up all the space in the parking lot. We had people that were kind of more like the goth and the emos. They were actually very kind people, but you'd have those stereotypical ideas about, you know, who they would be. And then you would have the jocks and the very athletic people, and those were always a popular crowd, like the athletes and people that were seen as attractive and wore the nice clothes. And it doesn't really feel like there's too much in between. I always tried to get in the popular crowd, but I was kind of more always on the edge of it. And finally, like my senior year, I finally realized I was just like, this is a pointless pursuit. So I just stopped trying. And that was freeing. That was really nice to realize. I think the biggest thing with a school that size is it feels like everyone kind of gets an idea of who you are as a young person, and especially as you get into middle school, and they put you in these boxes, and then you're basically stuck in these boxes until you graduate and you go somewhere else. You can't have a new identity. You can't change who you are. It feels very limiting. And there's times where I came to college and experienced like, okay, I can be myself and I can find new friend groups who have the same interests as I do, and then I would go back and be around some of my classmates from high school and just would feel limited again, like they're putting me back in this box and just stifled, and it just felt icky. So that was hard. Most of my classmates, though, if you're asking how I thought of them, there were some that I had good relationships with, and then there's others that I was kind of wary of, and I don't really have any memory of like hating anyone, but just kind of more of like, you know, liking them or just thinking like, okay, they're unreachable, or just kind of being wary of people and not putting too much trust into them.
So how do you think your classmates would remember you?
I don't know. My senior year, they voted me as most likely to be class president. I was ranked 8th or 9th in my class, and the only people before me were all girls, and so we had a very smart class of girls. I was the smartest boy in our class. I think I was very introverted middle school and early high school. I'm very shy, very afraid of venturing outside of that box, and I never wanted to get in trouble, and I never wanted to kind of rock the boat. Later on in high school, I became kind of mean and sarcastic, kind of as I realized that the pursuit of popularity was never going to happen, so I just started, you know, not being very nice to people, and that was for a good chunk of my senior year. And then at the end of my senior year, I kind of realized that wasn't the way to go either, and just started to enjoy being myself a little bit more and being friendly and being goofy with things. And so when people got to know me, at first I'd be very quiet, but after they got to know me, I could be kind of funny at times. I think they appreciated that. So.
How is the school day typically structured?
Well, we were in quarters, and it would be kind of like semesters, I guess. But we would have different classes each quarter, and I'm trying to remember how long the classes would be. It would be like 8 or 7 class periods throughout the day. Sometimes we'd have different classes each quarter that would kind of swap in and out, and then each semester classes would change even more drastically. So it's 7 or 8 periods throughout the day, and then the bell rang, we'd go to the next one. Something about the way that they set that up too, on days when we had a late start, the days seemed like they would drag on forever. Even though the classes were shortened, it just seemed like it went on forever. I don't know what it was about that.
Did you typically ever have like exams, writing assignments? Like what was a typical assignment like?
It would have been both. It would have been exams and writing assignments. I didn't study too much. I just kind of wung it on the exams, and I would do fine. I was an English major when I came to college, and so I did a lot of writing then. So when I think about writing in high school, I'm like, that was not so. I don't really feel like we had too much for writing inside of our English classes. Mostly I felt like it was exams and then some like homework assignments that they'd send home either on our computers or on a piece of paper. And try to get them done during the school day or during study hall. Crank it out real quick and then not have to worry about it at home.
So what sort of school supplies did you typically use?
Well, when I was younger, we would just load up. We would have folders and notebooks and pens and pencils and pencil bags and all this other stuff. And it was always really fun to get new equipment every single year for school and for study. In high school, it just became more like, okay, I just need a couple of notebooks and I need a couple of pencils and pens, and you know, just kind of got bare bones. I didn't really need too much. I didn't need the pencil bag. I didn't need much. I got my backpack and I was good.
So did you have any sort of music education in your school, like even a choir or band?
We did. Starting in 5th grade, we would go figure out what instrument we were best suited for and try a couple of different things. And I landed with the baritone and the trombone, played it for several years. I went to several honor bands. And then I actually quit in 8th grade because I was chasing popularity. I thought that's what the popular kids would do, and I had a friend who didn't play in the band, and he encouraged me to drop it, so I did, and my mom was disappointed, and our band directors were disappointed, but they couldn't stop me once I made up my mind, even though they tried, and I regret it, because I don't remember how to read music anymore, and I am musically inclined, but I just can't do music. I'd love to relearn how to do that.
So did you like it before you dropped?
Yeah, I think I did. There was a lot of pressure, because I was kind of good, and so they would pressure me to practice a lot and pressure me to go to these bands and things. And so my mom kind of regrets it because she feels like she pushed me too hard. But I did enjoy it. I think now looking back at it, if I could do it again, I think I'd have a lot more joy in it, just from a more mature mindset. I think I would just find a lot more pleasure in playing, practicing. But at the time, it was easy to think like, oh, I just want to do video games, or I just want to do my own thing. I don't want to have to be told what to do. But yeah, I did enjoy it.
So do you remember what was the typical lesson like?
I can't remember. We would have lessons during the school day. I don't remember if it was like during study hall or when we would find time for that. I don't know if it was like, I don't think we would leave a class, but we might have left a class. I feel like I left a science class before for a music lesson. And so the lesson would have been one-on-one. Sometimes there'd be multiple if there were, you know, a couple of trombone players or baritone players. But for the most part, because there's just a few of us, it felt like it was always one-on-one. And we'd have our lesson with our director and play the music. He would give us assignments that we would practice and work on, talk about.
When you were in elementary school, did you ever use any instruments like a recorder or any of that sort of stuff?
No, we didn't have a recorder. I guess we did go to a music classroom and we would play just a selection of really exotic instruments. And so I remember sitting in a circle and we'd all have, you know, like a triangle or an instrument that had bridges on it, and you'd rub a stick back and forth and it'd make noise. And so we would sit in a circle and pass those instruments. We'd play with them, and then pass them to the left and play with the new one. And so we did do a lot of things like that, where it wasn't really committed to playing an instrument, but just messing around with instruments, which was fun, and listening to music.
Did you ever put on any programs for your school, whether in elementary, middle, or high school?
Yes. We had like Christmas concerts and that type of thing, so we would sing in those. We'd always have opportunities to do solos if we wanted to, and I was always too shy. I was not gifted vocally though. I guess I did do a solo once, but it was actually on a little like xylophone, and there was like 2 other people that were doing it too, so there was 3 of us playing at the same time, if I remember correctly. And so there was a little bit of music that we got to do in elementary school for some of those programs. That was more than just singing. And because I wasn't a good singer, I would often just go into those programs and I would just lip sync to the words and not actually sing.
So did you do choir then?
Only when it was required. Middle school, we had a couple of required choir classes, but beyond that, I was like, I'm getting out of choir as quick as possible.
Did your school offer PE?
We did. We had PE. We had a lot of different games, and our PE teacher would always have different things that we play. We always got excited about dodgeball, of course, but then he had other games that he invented as well that we'd play.
What were some of those?
One of them, I can't remember what it was called, but it was basically you would have 2 teams, and one team would have a volleyball, and they'd throw the volleyball. It'd be kind of like a baseball. They'd like pitch the volleyball, but they would throw it slowly and it would bounce. and then you'd have your hand, and you'd have to hit the volleyball as hard as you could, or just punt it, I guess. And the other team would try to grab it and then take the volleyball and throw it at you. And if they hit you, then you'd be out. So your goal was to get to the opposite wall of the gym, and if you were on that wall, you were safe. And if you weren't on that wall and you got hit, then you'd be out. And so we would run to that end, and then when another person hit, then you'd be on the opposite wall and you'd try to run back to the base. So just kind of running back and forth. In that game, I actually fractured my radial head in my arm playing it because we had a brick wall at the end. And I was running and I wanted to avoid getting hit, so I sped up, but I was really close to the wall. So I sped up so the volleyball didn't hit me, but I hit the wall harder, and my arm, it wasn't out like this, thankfully, otherwise that would have been really bad if it had been locked, but it was broke, like kind of cracked like this, and then my elbow slammed into it, and I broke the radial head, and wasn't able to put my coat on later and had to go down to the doctor and get cast for it. So that was a little bit more dangerous game, I guess, now to think about, with that brick wall just running straight at it.
So how frequently did you have PE?
I think we had a PE class every semester, actually. I think so, throughout the whole entire year.
Was it daily or every other day? Or?
In high school, I don't think it was daily. I think it was every other day or something like that. It was like I think we had a 6-day system, and it would rotate depending on what day it was. So I can't quite remember when we would have PE.
So did you ever in PE use like the presidential fitness test or the fitness gram pacer?
In middle school, not in high school, we would have to do a fitness test where we'd have to run a mile, and we would get logged with how long we could do that or how fast we could do that. I always remember I was so frustrated because I was kind of a chunkier kid. I was out of shape. I didn't do much physical activity aside from romping around outside in the country on our own, and I wasn't in sports, and so I had to run a mile cold turkey, no preparation, and it took me like 13 minutes and something like that. So yeah, it was 13 or 14, which means like I pretty much walked that entire thing. It took me forever. Some kids are really fast and they completed it real quick. We'd also have to do pull-ups and push-ups, and I always hated it because, again, I wasn't fit, so I couldn't do a pull-up, I couldn't do a push-up. I wasn't flexible, and we had to, see how far we could stretch down to our feet and beyond, and yeah, that was not great. Did not enjoy that too much.
So did that stop in high school then?
I believe it pretty much did. We had like once that we did it in high school, and I was a little bit more fit at that time because I kind of got into lifting, and so it was a little bit easier. I was running at that point as well, but we didn't really do it very regularly. It seemed just kind of something that PE teacher did on a whim.
So did you always have to take PE, or did your school offer any like alternative health classes?
The only alternative for not taking PE would be being in a sport that semester. I think multiple sports, so I don't think cross country would have counted by itself because it was over in like October. I would have had to be in like wrestling or basketball as well. But for those 4 sport athletes, they just opted out of PE because they're like, they don't need to take it.
So you mentioned that you did cross country. Did you do any other sports or?
No, cross country was it. I played soccer in elementary school, and I loved soccer, but our school wasn't big enough to continue it, so I would have had to drive to Charles City and join in the team, and I was just too shy to meet new kids.
So what were the competitions or practices like for cross country?
As far as competitions go, we would run usually on golf courses or at nature areas, and we would drive there, and there'd be a bunch of schools mixing and mingling about, and we just wait for our race, but there was just only a couple of races. It wasn't like track, which has multiples just going all the time. We just wait for our race, and we'd all line up, and I was always on JV, and so we'd run and see how we did, and then after that we would cheer on the varsity when they raced. As far as practices go, it wasn't too formal. I don't know if our cross-country coach really knew what he was doing, but we would just run around town and just run loops and run all over the place in Greene, so we would go everywhere.
So did sports ever conflict with your classes? Like, did you ever leave early for a game? Or?
We had to leave early a couple of times for cross-country meets. It just depended on what was the 8th hour, that last hour of the day. Sometimes it was study hall, sometimes it would have been class, but it didn't feel like a math class, but we didn't really miss out on too much because the teacher would change his teaching according to that day and what that looked like.
Did your team ever go to like a playoffs or a state?
Yeah, we went to state. I never ran at state or anything, but we had a couple of runners that were good enough to go to state, and so we would go and cheer them on.
So did your school ever offer any foreign language classes?
Yes, I took Spanish for 3 years.
Did you like taking Spanish?
I did, yeah. I did enjoy it. I took 3 years. I don't know why. I could have taken 4 because that might have been some of the other requirements that other colleges had, but I wasn't sure. So I just took 3. I think I would have liked it more if I put more effort into it, but I just wung it, and I was more focused on video games. So I think I would have really enjoyed it if I'd really spent the time practicing it, but I didn't.
So did your school ever offer art classes? And did you take them?
Yes, school, we had lots of art classes, and I took the graphic design one, and then I also took some of the other ones related to painting, and we did a little bit of sculpture. It was kind of a hodgepodge of different things.
Did you ever need to purchase any additional school supplies for that?
No, the school always provided all of them.
So did your school ever offer any either special ed classes or gifted classes?
There were special ed classes. I didn't have to take part in them, but I know some students, friends that would get pulled out of class to go to those. We did have talented and gifted program, and I was a part of that, and we do a whole bunch of different activities. They didn't really have that too much in high school. It was more of a middle school thing.
Was it elementary school at all either, or just like middle school?
Actually, it was in elementary school as well. I don't remember too much what we did. And then in middle school, I don't really remember too much. They just had some special projects and stuff that they did, but I think I eventually just stopped going to talented and gifted. I don't know why. I just kind of wasn't interested in what they were doing, so I just stopped going.
Was it for a specific class, like reading or math or something, or was it just overarching
thing, yeah.
Did your school have a guidance counselor?
We did, yes.
Was their job primarily focused on helping students apply for colleges, or were they more seen as like an on-site therapist or a mix of both?
I felt like it was more of the college side of things. It didn't really feel too much, and maybe it's just because I didn't need it, but I didn't really feel like there was a lot of like therapy going on. But other students might have used it, I guess, but I don't really know.
Was mental health really at all discussed in classes?
Not at all. It was always just college preparation and finding scholarships, that type of thing.
So did your school offer any practical courses like shop class, sewing class, food or cooking, home ec?
Yep, all of those.
Did you take any of those?
Yes, I took the shop class. I didn't really take. I took drafting 1 and 2, but then after that I didn't take any other shop classes. I wasn't interested in those. Though again, man, if I could go back and retake high school classes, I would, because I feel like I would be interested in learning some of those skills. I'm not handy now, and some of those shop classes would have helped with that. And then I did take a home cooking, home ec class where we had to sew and make pillows, and you had the option of making a quilt if you wanted to. And there's a foods course where you cook, and we would host a meal or a banquet for people in the community that bought tickets, and then we would treat them to this extravagant cooking.
So what was the most interesting thing that you either built or made in those classes, would you say?
One of the things that I can remember, just because it just stayed around, was a pillow, and it was 2 different colors, and it had, I think, my initials on it and the year that I was graduating. I think my family just threw that out not too long ago. My brother made a great, beautiful UNI quote once he knew he was coming to UNI. It's fantastic. It's really well done. And then otherwise we just made that big banquet. So we would all help with different parts of a dish, making a dessert and making a main course and things like that, and doing the dishes.
Would you say you still use the skills that you learned there to this day?
Oh, no, I don't think so. Like I said, I didn't take much for shop, so I'm not handy that way. Sewing, I don't remember how to sew at all. Cooking, I don't really have to do too much because I'm blessed with a wonderful wife who loves to cook, and so she does all the cooking. I guess maybe the skill that I use is hospitality and just hosting people at our house, but that was more taught to me by my mom, even more so than that foods class. And so my mom was just a good hostess and taught us how to be good hosts as well. So I don't really feel like I use those classes too much. It's maybe to my detriment.
Did your school teach you driver's ed, or did you do that through a private company?
It was a school. We had driver's ed classes.
Was that mandatory or optional?
I feel like it was optional. You could sign up to do it.
And in those driver's ed classes, did you just learn how to drive, or did they teach you other like practical things?
It was just how to drive.
Did your school teach you cursive?
Yes, and then they gave us the option in middle school. If we wanted to use it, still we could. If we didn't need to, so I started going back to print. And I know how to make cursive letters, all lowercase. I don't remember how to make the uppercase letters. I don't really know if I could write in cursive. I might be able to, but it's going to take some jogging in my memory to do it again.
So did you learn to tell time on an actual like clock, or just was it digital?
No, we learned on an analog.
So what were your teachers like?
They were good. They were friendly, kind of all over the place. Middle school teachers were, they seemed very nurturing. I don't really have too many bad experiences with middle school teachers. Principal, I don't know if we liked him very much. He was just kind of a domineering person. High school, I had a couple of teachers that were just a little bit sarcastic, and I think I had one teacher that kind of like, he was a good teacher, kind of boring and hard to listen to, but I think he also saw the potential in us, and when we didn't kind of look to achieve that potential, I think he got frustrated with us. I had one teacher who taught geometry, and he was just really fun and goofy and all over the place. Everyone loved having classes with him, and I learned a lot about geometry from him. He's a good math teacher.
What did teachers typically wear as like professional?
They would just kind of dress up nicely. They would wear polos like this, sometimes skirts or dresses for the women, but yeah, just kind of like business, casual.
So did you typically come prepared for class?
It depends on the class. Most of the time, yes. There were definitely times where I did not finish my homework or I did not put the effort in, but most of the time I did come prepared. Though there were plenty of times in high school, again, where I got gaming and I could care less about preparing for class, and I would show up and not realize that we had a test that day, in Spanish, for example.
What were some of the rules of your classroom, and then if you broke those rules, how did a teacher typically respond to that?
I feel like we all followed the rules pretty well. Normally just, like, you can't go out in the hallway and wander around. When the teacher's talking, you gotta listen and be quiet. If the rules were broken as far as talking goes, you just get a warning. Eventually you might get maybe sent out in the hallway, and if it's really bad, you get sent down to the principal's office.
So how did you receive your books for school?
We would get them from the teacher of that class.
Well, what was lunchtime typically like?
When lunchtime was getting close, it was always really antsy. As soon as the bell would ring, we would just sprint down the hallway. We were not supposed to run the hallways, but we would speed walk. So our stuff in our locker. We didn't even care if it was a mess or not, and we tried to get in line so we could be the first to get our lunch. Once we got our food, we would just go find a table and sit at it. It felt like there was always a competition for seats. We had one table that was only 8 seats, and there's a 9th person that always wanted to sit at our table, so we were always trying to find, okay, who's going to sit at this table for 8, and who's going to get the seat for the day, and who's going to get ousted. Eventually they had us move. The teacher kind of realized that one person was having to sit alone at lunch, so the teacher had us move to a bigger table so we could all sit together. Lunch was a pretty relaxed time. We just eat our food and then take our trays back, maybe get seconds. If not, then sometimes the guys would go hang out in the bathroom. I never did that. A lot of jokes, a lot of pranks happened until the bell rang again.
Did you usually just get to sit wherever you wanted, or was there a seating chart?
No, we got to sit where we wanted.
Did students typically bring their own lunches, or did most people just get whatever the lunch was provided?
Yeah, most people got what lunch provided. I don't think anyone brought their lunches. No, I guess maybe a couple people did, but it was not very common to bring lunches.
Did your school ever offer open campus lunch?
Actually, I think for the seniors during finals week. Otherwise, I don't think so.
And how did you pay for lunch?
They would just put it on our account, and we'd have an account that would be sent back to our parents, and they would pay it eventually, or our parents would put money into the account, so they would let us know.
Okay. Would you have a punch card, or a card to swipe, or put in a number?
A number. Yeah, it was a number. We'd have a number and we'd have to say it to them, and they'd type it in.
When you were in elementary school and you had recess, what was it typically like?
Warm months were great. We had just a lot of different toys, things to play on. We played knockout, basketball, hoops, or soccer, and it was always fun during the warm months too, because we had some old trees nearby, so we could go explore in some of those older big trees. When we played soccer, sometimes there would be streaky gophers running in the grass, and they would have paths, and we would chasing them around. We would play on the balancing beams and the slides. There's a wooden bridge that we would jump around on and play tag. There's some kids that would get super organized, and they had this kind of tire castle, 2 of them, and some kids would organize the other kids to do basically make a fort in this tire thing and create these trail systems, do a whole bunch of other things like that. It's actually kind of remarkable for elementary students what they're able to organize and accomplish. And then during the winter, we all do the same. We remember making ice very valuable, and so ice we would trade for snowballs, and we would make snow forts, and we used ice as a currency during the winter. So play all sorts of things. We do a lot of role playing too. I remember playing in 4th grade We were pretending we're all different characters of Lord of the Rings, and we would have battles and stuff like that. So.
When the weather got really bad, did you ever have indoor recess, and what was that like?
Indoor recess, yeah. We would go into a classroom and we would play different board games, set up different, play toys. And there were some computers that you could use too, so if you're quick enough, you could go inside and play on the computers, which, again, I would like to do if I could. They're some pretty fun games to play.
Did your school ever have any sort of forbidden games or things that you were not allowed to play?
Yeah, we had some, forbidden things, especially later on in high school, when I was supposed to be on Minecraft or RuneScape, but we would always find ways around that. Other than that, we weren't supposed to throw snowballs at each other, and so if we got in trouble for that, we'd have to go stand on the wall.
Did your school have a school nurse?
We did. I don't really remember it too well, but they had a couple of little beds down there, so if you weren't feeling well, you could go down there.
Did your school offer, eye exams, hearing tests, any inoculations, anything like that?
Yeah, they did. Yeah, we had hearing exams and eye tests a couple of different times throughout the year. Or maybe once a year.
And then, did your school ever offer nap time, when you were younger in elementary school?
Yeah, in kindergarten we had nap time, and I think pre-K too.
Did you ever have to bring anything from home for nap time?
No. Well, maybe they brought a blanket. I can't remember. But they had little mats that we would roll out, and not really roll out, unfold. And we would sit on those. So
then, how did the school day typically end?
After the last class of the day, the bell would ring, and we would go down to our lockers, grab our stuff, and be off for the day.
What time was that?
2:57, 3 o'clock, 3:15. Just kind of in that realm. Wasn't too long after 3.
Did you get home in the same way you got to school, with the bus?
My parents dropped us off at school in the morning. And in high school, we drove just ourselves. But in late middle school, we would ride the bus home.
Was there any chores or anything you had to do when you got home?
It depends. Sometimes if we had dishes to do, we would do those. But mostly we're just kind of given free rein. We didn't usually got our stuff done in the morning before we went to school. There were some things we had to do. Most of the chores would kind of kick in a little bit after dinner. We had some more things that we needed to do. But other than that, the first few hours after the school day were kind of free.
Were there any other extracurricular activities that you participated in besides cross-country and then band?
National Honor Society. I don't think there's anything else.
Did your school ever require you to take any standardized tests like Iowa Basic Skills, ITBS, Iowa Assessments, anything like that?
Yes, we took basic skills and we took, I think, the maths testing, so we did both of those.
When did you have to start taking these tests?
I want to say as early as 4th grade. I feel like I remember taking basic skills in 4th grade, but I don't remember. Maths testing feels like it was also kind of early too. Just remember doing those all the way through.
Well, how did you feel about these tests?
I always tried to do my best. The maths testing, we had to go to a computer lab, and then we would just try to get as much done as we could in the time frame. Usually completed the test. Later down on in high school, I realized that the tests were not really that useful. I wasn't being graded on them, so I cared a little bit less. And I just kind of buzzed through them. But the teachers would warn not to finish them too fast, because then they realized you didn't care and you just buzzed through it. Basic skills, I always tried my best as well, and I took those all the way through. Seniors didn't have to do basic skills, so that was nice. When you had that week, I could just take those hours off. So
did you ever have to take a test to determine aptitude or what maybe your future job opportunity would be?
Took one in middle school, but not to determine what our gifts or skill sets were, but more so to figure out what we were interested in doing. And I remember thinking, I don't know how accurate this is because things might change. But I also remember not really finding anything that I was super interested in doing. I didn't really know what to expect. And I was kind of aimless, I guess, my entire high school career until I took Composition 1 and 2. And I loved those courses. Those dual enrollment through NIAC. I took those courses and I was like, oh, I like reading and writing about what I'm reading. So I became an English major, though I didn't have any idea what I'd do with an English major. So it's still kind of aimless even in college, but I was confident that getting good reading and writing skills and practicing that would pay off eventually, and I think it has.
So when you did that to kind of that test in middle school, did they give you a specific job that they thought you'd be most likely to pursue?
Yes, but I don't remember what it was.
So did you ever have to take the SAT or ACT?
I took the ACT.
Did you ever take any prep classes or pre-tests for it?
No, I never did. My parents got me a book to study so I could practice, but I never did that either. I just went, took it once, and called that good enough.
Did you consider it to be very difficult or stressful?
The timing was kind of stressful, but for the most part I found it to be pretty alright. The time was the most stressful thing. There's a couple of difficult sections in math and science, but reading English were alright. I scored a 26 on reading and English and a 24 on math and science, so I got a composite score of 25. And for not studying, I thought that was pretty good, so I went with it.
So when you were in school, did your school have any like fire drill, tornado drill, like code reds or active shooter drills?
Yes, we had all of those.
So what were those typically like?
Depending on where we were, the alarm would go off if it was for tornado or fire, and we would just go to where we needed to be, whether it was in the hallway or whether it was outside, and it would interrupt classes and all that. Active shooter drills didn't really happen that much, but when they did, it was more so in middle school. We would just clump together in the classroom and hide, and that was it.
Did you ever have any incidents regarding safety at your school?
Aside from maybe one or two kids pulling a fire alarm, I can't think of anything.
So you mentioned that your school was consolidated. What was that experience like?
It was interesting. 4th grade and younger, it didn't really matter to me at all. And it kind of consolidated during my year in 4th grade, or maybe it was 3rd grade, one of the two. But anyways, the consolidation really started affecting us in 5th grade when we would be transported to the other school and meet people in our grade that went to Allison or Bristow. So it was like all of a sudden our class size doubled from 20 to 40. And so that was interesting. Got to meet a lot of new people, make some new friends. And I remember feeling just kind of like nervous around these kids and wondering who they were. And we got used to it pretty quickly. Though I think in 4th grade they tried to prep us by making us have pen pals. So we'd have pen pals that we'd write back and forth.
Do you have any particular memories from that experience?
I remember writing a friend, finding a friend and writing him. His name is Thomas. And we would write back and forth about, meeting each other in the next coming year and things like that. Other than that, I just remember riding the bus and being nervous, and then being in some classes where we didn't know each other, and so this teacher was doing some kind of like icebreaker stuff and having us introduce ourselves, and that was like kind of reading or spelling class. It was uncomfortable for a couple of days, and then we got used to it really quickly.
Did you have a parent on the school board during that time?
Mm-hmm.
Did lessons or anything change as this class sizes got bigger?
Not noticeably. Lessons and class stuff changed. It was more in regarding to just being an older grade and knowing more. How
did you feel about combining the schools together?
At first I thought it was silly. I didn't think it was needed. I didn't understand it. And I don't know if I even really thought about it too much, beyond just like wondering, why is this happening? And why is this necessary? And then after we'd been consolidated for a couple of years, I remember being kind of sad that we'd lose our mascot. We were the Greene Rams. Our school colors were green and white. And then losing that to becoming the North Butler Bearcats, I was like, the Bearcats sound lame. And the colors navy and gold are lame too. But we, again, adjusted quickly.
Was there a lot of pushback in the community at all? Or how did the communities feel about joining schools together?
I don't really remember too much. I think Greene's was a pretty proud town, kind of had like entitled citizens, and I don't think they were too excited about it. They tried to hold off consolidation as long as possible until there just wasn't any option anymore. Allison seemed like they were more open to it. Greene had more resources, and so Greene was able to leverage like using the high school and being able to have that, while Allison took the middle school and one of the elementaries. Now Allison has the elementary and the middle school. I think people got used to it after a while, but in the first couple of years they were not too happy about it, especially because Allison and Greene have been rivals as well.
Did that impact making friends and getting like with the other students at all, or?
Not really, because we were young enough where it didn't really matter to us. The older grades probably had a little bit more challenges of that, but again, I didn't really hear too much about it.
What was the school year-round schedule like?
We would start in early August a lot of times. I felt like early August, and it might have been like 20th or in that kind of range, but it felt like it was earlier than it needed to be. And it was usually by the time the state fair was going, and then we would be done in late May, early June, depending on how many snow days we had. Have a little bit of a Christmas break and a little bit of a Thanksgiving break. We didn't get much for spring break, just a couple of days off around Easter.
So during summer break, what did you typically do?
I would help around the farm. We didn't have to have jobs. My brother and I weren't required to work anywhere. My parents talked about it, but never made it a requirement for us. So, we would mow lawns, and that was kind of a job, but it was really informal and didn't require a lot of time because we just mowed like 2 neighbor ladies' lawns and then our own lawn. I mean, it was a big farm lawn, so it took a while. We took multiple mowers over to get it done. Other than that, we video gamed, we played outside, romped around a lot.
What did other students around your community typically do in the summer months?
In town, I think they hung out a lot. We didn't really get to town much, aside from going in for like parades or stuff like that. And we didn't really see friends or didn't make an effort to stay connected to friends. So like we would go like 3 months without seeing people that we considered friends and from school, because we wouldn't see them from end of May to August. So it was like, wow, seeing everyone again. But I think they went to the pool and hung out and did a lot of things like that.
So did your school ever offer any sort of class parties or dances anywhere?
Yeah, they had some dances. In middle school, they had, I think, the North Butler Bearcat Bash or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a dance that happened. And then there was also classrooms that they converted to like little game rooms, so you could go play dodgeball or you could go play Mario Kart Wii or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
In high school, they had dances too. So I didn't go to prom, and I didn't go to any of the dances in high school. I went to a couple of the middle school dances, but it was awkward and I didn't know what I was doing. I went to, I think, maybe one homecoming dance, but I was there for literally 5 or 10 minutes, and I was like, okay, I'm over this, and I left.
Was homecoming seen as like a formal event, or was it more informal?
It was more informal.
Were there any special events at your school that involved the larger community?
We had a homecoming parade, and that involved the community, and so we would ride around. And if we were on the sports teams, that is, we would have a fire truck, and then we would ride on the fire truck in this little mini parade. But other than that, you know, your normal games and plays and musicals.
So did you ever do any musicals or plays or any of that? Were you involved?
No,
Okay.
no, I didn't.
So then, was your school used for any sort of community events, like the building itself or the grounds itself?
I think they had a waffle fundraise, but I can't remember who that was for. It might have been for the school itself.
And then did your school ever do any sort of community service events or public events?
That was more through National Honor Society. We would do a little bit of yard work around the school, or we do blood drives with the American Red Cross.
Do you ever remember any major local, national, or world events that occurred during your school years?
9/11 would have happened when I was in kindergarten, so I don't remember it very well at all. I mean, I think I remember just enough of like our teachers kind of being speechless and school day kind of changed all of a sudden. I think I remember President Bush being elected when I was in elementary school.
So then what did you do after you finished school and graduated?
I had a summer before coming to UNI, and then I came to UNI and studied English and creative writing, and I was relocated just 45 minutes south of where I went to school and grew up.
So when you graduated from UNI, did you enter a particular job or career?
I went on to conservation corps, and so I spent 100 days in California working on removing invasive species and removing thistles specifically, and then building trails for the last half of it. So we would be camping in the woods for 8 days at a time in the backcountry, and then we would have like 6 days off in Lake Tahoe in California. Then I came back, got married, and started looking for jobs here. I was a tutor for a while, working in respite care, and then I got a job in admissions at UNI, and so now I recruit students from small town southern Iowa to come here to go to school.
Looking back at your school times, did you ever have a best or worst day at school?
The worst day at school were the days where it felt like I was being made fun of. And there were times where that happened, where I was teased, and probably the worst days of school were when I was an underclassman, like freshman, sophomore year in high school, because the upperclassmen classes, like the class right above us and the class 2 classes above us, they just had some really mean guys in those classes. Like, they were vicious and out there to just destroy people, it seemed. The best days were when I was an upperclassman, and I didn't go out of my way to like make people's lives miserable, but being able to like not have that fear of being picked on and bullied and things like that.
So what are some important takeaways that you want people to remember from your school experience?
I feel like small school class sizes is like a blessing and a curse. High school kids just in general can just be really mean at times. I don't know what it is about that age group, but they can just be really, really harsh. And so I would say, well, a small school is kind of a blessing in terms of just knowing everyone. There were some limitations and just opportunities and possibilities, and sometimes knowing everyone is kind of a hassle when they put you inside of a box and they don't let you out of it. I had a fine school experience. I'm thankful for my education, but it's also one that I don't care to really go back to unless I was going back to be like, younger Avery, don't play video games so much and actually do some studying.
And in your opinion, what are some of the biggest changes to education over the years?
Probably technology. Just technology being implemented and classes figuring out how to use it. It's one thing putting technology in a classroom and not really knowing what you're doing with it, because kids are just gonna pick up on it really quickly and find ways to use it and even abuse it. But then there's opportunities now to just try to keep ahead of, kids. They're always going to be trying to outsmart. Yeah, but there's ways where technology can be a really big blessing in the classroom if used properly. So I think that's probably the biggest change.
And is there anything that you wanted to talk about, but maybe we just didn't get the chance to?
I think that covers everything.
Sweet. Thank you so much for interviewing with me today.